You think you know how Rasputin died. Poison, gunshots, drowning. But what truly transpired in that basement on December 30th, 1916, was far more savage than any movie portrays. The notorious mystic didn't just refuse to die, he fought back with a supernatural fury that left his killers traumatized for life. Why did Russia's most powerful nobles spend hours trying to murder one man? What went so wrong that they needed multiple weapons, a car, and a frozen river to finish the job? Grigori Efimovich Rasputin held sway over the Russian throne through Tsarina Alexandra. Born in 1869 in Pokrovskoye, Siberia, this peasant mystic convinced the imperial family he could heal their hemophiliac son, Alexei. By 1914, he was making state decisions while the Tsar fought World War I. Noble families watched their empire crumble under his influence. Prince Felix Yusupov, Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, and parliamentarian Vladimir Purishkevich decided he had to be eliminated. If you value documented historical accounts like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Yusupov's memoirs and police investigation records. Now, back to the story. December 30th, 1916, 11 p.m., Yusupov's Moika Palace basement, St. Petersburg. The prince had spent weeks planning. He invited Rasputin for a late dinner, claiming his wife Irina wanted to meet him. In reality, she was hundreds of miles away in Crimea. The basement room was prepared, cakes and wine laced with enough potassium cyanide to dispatch 5 men, enough poison to drop a horse within mere minutes. The planning had started in November. Yusupov met secretly with Purishkevich at the Duma building. They recruited Grand Duke Dmitry through his mistress, who convinced him that killing Rasputin would restore his good name with the Tsar. Dr. Lazovert joined after his own wife was refused an audience with the Tsarina because of Rasputin's interference. Each conspirator had personal reasons beyond patriotism. Yusupov had rehearsed the invitation 3 times. He sent his servant to Rasputin's apartment on Gorokhovaya Street with verbal messages. The mystic was suspicious at first. Why would Princess Irina, who had avoided him for years, suddenly want a midnight meeting? But Yusupov played to his vanity. Oh, she has heard stories about your healing powers. The princess is desperate for a child. The basement was set up like a stage play. Yusupov moved furniture to create clear sightlines for the shooting. He positioned the gramophone near the door so music would drown out any screams. The conspirators practiced their timing. Who would go where when Rasputin fell? They assumed he would collapse within minutes of eating. The poison came from army stores. Lazovert had access to chemical weapons through his military contacts. He pilfered enough potassium cyanide to fell 50 men. The conspirators tested different delivery methods on stray dogs behind the palace. Wine worked faster than food. They decided to use both for certainty. Rasputin arrived, wearing his best silk blouse and velvet trousers. Black boots? Yusupov led him downstairs while conspirators waited above. Purishkevich, Dmitry, Army Doctor Stanislav Lazovert, and Officer Sukhotin. The basement felt warm. Persian carpets, bearskin rugs, ebony cabinets filled with Italian Renaissance art. Midnight struck. Rasputin consumed 2 cakes. Downed 2 glasses of wine. The poison had no effect whatsoever. He asked for more wine. Yusupov played guitar while Rasputin hummed along, completely unaffected. The conspirators upstairs heard singing. 2.5 hours passed. The mystic displayed not a single symptom of poisoning. 2:30 a.m. Yusupov excused himself, claiming to check on his wife. He seized Dmitry's savage revolver from upstairs. He returned to find Rasputin examining the ebony crucifix cabinet, tracing the carved Orthodox saints with his fingers. The mystic seemed lost in thought, possibly praying. "You'd better look at the crucifix and say a prayer," Yusupov said, raising the revolver. Rasputin turned slowly, unsurprised. His pale eyes met Yusupov's. "Felix, you've made a terrible mistake." Then the prince fired 1 shot into his back, below the heart. The bullet ripped through Rasputin's silk blouse and lodged near his spine. The impact threw him against the cabinet. Renaissance figurines crashed to the floor. Blood sprayed across the ebony wood. He collapsed face first onto the Persian carpet, arms splayed wide. Almost like a crucifixion. His breathing was faint but steady. Rasputin collapsed. Blood pooled on the Persian carpet. Yusupov checked his pulse. Nothing. The conspirators celebrated upstairs with champagne while Lazovert examined the body, pronounced dead. They planned to dispose of him in the Neva River within the hour, but the celebration was a tad premature. Lazovert, despite being drunk, noticed Rasputin's pupils still responded to light. His complexion was all wrong for a cadaver. The doctor said nothing to the others. He was too inebriated to trust his own professional judgment. Later, he would call this the gravest error of his professional life. The conspirators spent 45 minutes preparing for disposal. They wrapped chains around the body and gathered heavy stones from the palace garden. Purishkevich brought rope from the carriage house. Sukhotin found old blankets to prevent bloodstains in the car. They worked methodically, assuming their target was decisively dead. 3:15 a.m. Yusupov returned alone to the basement. He wanted to retrieve a precious ring from Rasputin's finger, a sapphire worth a couple of $1,000s. As he bent over the body, Rasputin's eyes shot open. They were bloodshot but fully alert. He grabbed Yusupov by the throat with unearthly strength, ripping the shoulder of the prince's jacket. Felix! Felix! I'll tell the Tsarina everything!" he snarled. The grip was like a vice. Yusupov couldn't breathe or scream. Rasputin's fingernails dug into his neck, drawing blood. The prince later described the mystic's face as demonic, his eyes wide, foam at his mouth, teeth bared like a wild animal. He reeked of death and stale vodka, a scent that would plague Yusupov for decades. Yusupov screamed. Rasputin stood up, blood streaming from the gunshot wound. The bullet had missed his heart by just over an inch. It punctured his left lung but avoided major arteries. His lung was collapsed, making breathing difficult but not impossible. He had been unconscious from shock, not dying from blood loss. The dying monk charged up the basement stairs on sheer adrenaline. His lung was filling with blood, but rage kept him moving. Yusupov followed, shouting for help. The other conspirators heard the uproar and ran downstairs. They found Rasputin bursting through the palace doors and into the courtyard, running toward Nevsky Prospect. The wound hadn't slowed him down. He moved like a man driven by demons. The snow in the courtyard was knee-deep from a blizzard that had struck 3 days earlier. Rasputin's boots left deep prints leading toward the street. He was moving in a straight line toward the nearest police station, about half a mile distant. If he reached it alive, the conspiracy would be uncovered within hours. The Tsar would have them all executed for high treason. Purishkevich chased him outside with a Savage revolver. His hands were trembling from drink and sheer terror. The first shot missed. Rasputin kept running through knee-deep snow. The bullet hit a palace window, shattering glass that fell like rain. The second shot missed. The bullet struck a tree, sending splinters flying. The third shot hit him in the back. Rasputin stumbled but didn't fall. The third bullet entered below his right shoulder blade and exited through his chest. It missed his spine by a hair's breadth, but punctured his other lung. Now both lungs were compromised. Blood was pouring from 2 exit wounds. He collapsed to his knees in the snow, yet continued to crawl toward the street. And the fourth shot struck his head. The bullet entered behind his right ear and lodged in his brain. This should have killed him instantly. Instead, he collapsed in the snow about 50 feet from the palace entrance, still drawing breath. The wound was fatal, but it would take several more minutes for him to die. His body simply refused to yield. The conspirators dragged his body back inside, leaving a 160-foot trail of blood in the snow. Rasputin was still breathing, making gurgling sounds from his ravaged lungs. Blood bubbled from his mouth with each breath. Yusupov beat him with a rubber truncheon while the others held him down. It took 23 blows to the head before he stopped moving. They bound his hands behind his back with rope from the stable. The rope was thick hemp, typically used for horses. They wrapped it so tightly it severed circulation to his fingers. Then they wrapped him in a blue velvet curtain from the palace drawing room. The fabric was fine Italian silk, worth more than many Russians earned in a year. It would become his final shroud. Loading him into Purishkevich's car required all 5 men. Rasputin was over 6 feet tall and pushing 200 pounds. Dead weight, they soon discovered, was far more cumbersome than a struggling living man. They had to bend his legs and compress his torso to fit him in the back seat. Blood soaked through the silk curtain, staining the car's leather upholstery. 4:30 a.m. They drove to Petrovsky Bridge, spanning the Little Neva. The bridge was wooden, built in 1803 during the reign of Alexander I. It was the closest stretch of water that was both dark and secluded. No streetlights, no night watchmen. Perfect for disposing of evidence. The river was frozen solid, save for a narrow channel near the bridge supports. December had been unusually bitter, temperatures plummeting to minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 weeks. The ice was a foot thick. They used Sukhotin's military-issue pickaxe and threw rocks for 20 minutes. The hole they created was barely wide enough. They had to fold Rasputin's legs to fit him through. At the river, they struggled mightily to break through the ice. The pickaxe blade chipped against the frozen water. Their hands grew numb within minutes. Sukhotin's military training proved invaluable. He knew how to breach ice for winter river crossings. Their civilian tools, however, were proving woefully inadequate. They required a full 40 minutes to hack a hole large enough for a body, but they made another mistake beyond the insufficient weighting. They forgot to weight the body properly. Used only a single iron chain around his chest, a mere 44 pounds, not enough for the river current. A body needs at least 110 pounds minimum to stay submerged in moving water. They were exhausted, inebriated, and utterly panicked. Basic physics, it seemed, had entirely eluded them. They threw him in face first. The blue curtain trapped air bubbles around his head, creating a small breathing pocket. The silk fabric didn't absorb water immediately. It was so tightly woven. This gave him precious extra minutes beneath the frigid water. Minutes he used to fight for his life one final time. The autopsy report unveiled the true horror. Dr. Dmitry Kosoratov performed the examination on January 1st, 1917. Rasputin had survived the poison, the first gunshot, the beating, and the binding. The presence of water in his lungs confirmed he was still alive when they plunged him through the ice. He had freed one hand from the rope and clawed desperately at the ice, fighting to escape. His fingernails were bloody and shattered. Gaping scratch marks marred the underside of the ice sheet where he had fought to break through. The water temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. He survived underwater for several agonizing minutes before finally succumbing to the frigid depths. His last act was an attempt to make the sign of the cross with his freed hand. 3 days later, the body surfaced near Krestovsky Island. A police patrol spotted it frozen solid in the ice downstream. The imperial family demanded an immediate burial at Tsarskoye Selo. Alexandra and her daughters personally placed sacred icons on his coffin. The Tsar ordered full Orthodox funeral rites, despite the church's strong objections. The poison should have worked within 15 minutes. Dr. Lazovert had tested the potassium cyanide on the family cat 3 days earlier. The animal died instantly. He used 5 times that amount in each cake and wine glass, enough to kill 20 men Rasputin's size. But there's a medical explanation rarely discussed. Rasputin suffered from severe gastritis, a consequence of years of heavy alcohol consumption. His stomach lining was scarred and unusually thick. The acid levels were so low that the cyanide couldn't properly convert to hydrogen cyanide gas. What should have been instant death became a mere stomach irritation. His damaged digestive system, ironically, had saved his life. The conspirators had no contingency plan. They expected him dead within minutes of eating the first cake. Yusupov later claimed they waited for over 3 agonizing hours in a state of utter panic. Dmitry wanted to abort the mission. Purishkevich insisted on continuing. They drew straws to determine who would fire the first shot. Yusupov drew the shortest straw. When Rasputin grabbed Yusupov's throat in the basement, he left finger bruises that lingered for a fortnight. The prince's jacket was torn at both shoulders. Buttons lay scattered across the floor. Yusupov said the mystic's eyes seemed to glow yellow in the dim light. His breath reeked of sulfur and vodka. The grip was powerful enough to crack the prince's collarbone. The chase through the courtyard left streaks of blood in the snow for over 160 feet. Police investigators found Rasputin's boot prints, then drag marks where he had crawled after the third gunshot. He managed to crawl 65 feet on his hands and knees before the fourth bullet stopped him. The snow was stained crimson in a perfect circle around where he fell. Inside the car, Rasputin regained consciousness on 2 separate occasions. The first time near Troitsky Bridge, he tried to sit up and speak. Purishkevich struck him again with the rubber truncheon. The second time at a traffic light on Nevsky Prospect. His eyes opened and he whispered something in a Siberian dialect. None of them understood a single word. At the river, they struggled to hack through the ice. December had been unusually cold. The ice was a foot thick. They used Sukotin's military pickaxe and threw rocks for 20 minutes. The hole they created was barely wide enough. They had to fold Rasputin's legs to fit him through, but they made another mistake beyond the insufficient weighting. They threw him in face first. The blue curtain trapped air bubbles around his head, creating a small breathing pocket. Forensic analysis conducted in the 1960s proved he survived underwater for at least 8 harrowing minutes, long enough to free his right hand and claw desperately at the icy ceiling. The scratch marks told a story. Deep gouges in the ice, some stretching over 4 inches long. Frozen blood caked beneath his fingernails. His knuckles were scraped raw from punching upwards. One fingernail was completely torn off, found embedded in the ice. He had fought with everything he had left. Dr. Kosratov's autopsy report runs 23 pages. Rasputin's lungs contained a gallon of river water. His stomach held fragments of cake and wine, but no trace whatsoever of cyanide's effects. The first gunshot had missed major organs entirely. The second and third shots were not immediately fatal. Only the fourth shot to his head would have killed him quickly. Most disturbing was the evidence of continued struggle even after being plunged into the river. Rope burns on both wrists showed he had worked at his bonds underwater. The blue curtain was partially unwrapped from his torso. He He had tried to swim upward using his legs. The water in his stomach proved he had been swallowing and breathing during the agonizing drowning process. His body temperature when found was 5 degrees Fahrenheit, completely frozen solid. The police needed steam to thaw him sufficiently for examination. His clothes were frozen to his skin. The prayer book in his coat pocket was a solid block of ice that took 6 hours to separate without damage. The Tsarina's reaction sent shivers through the court. When news reached Tsarskoye Selo on January 2nd, Ostars, 1917, she locked herself away in her private chapel for 18 hours. She emerged claiming Rasputin had appeared to her in a vision, warning of impending disaster. She ordered his body exhumed and reburied with a piece of her own jewelry, a gold icon worth several $1,000s. The funeral drew hundreds of peasants who believed Rasputin was a holy man. They fought palace guards for the chance to touch his coffin. 3 women claimed immediate healing from various ailments after kissing his frozen hands. The Orthodox Church refused to conduct proper rites, so a rogue priest performed the ceremony in secret. Alexander commissioned a death mask crafted from his frozen face. The sculptor worked for 12 hours as his head slowly thawed. The mask captured every detail: the wild beard, the piercing, deep-set eyes, the bullet wound in his forehead. She kept it in her private chambers until the Revolution. The Bolsheviks found it during the palace raid in October 1917. The assassination failed to save Russia. Revolution broke out 2 months later, in February of 1917. The Tsar abdicated in March. The entire Romanov family was murdered by the Bolsheviks in July of 1918, precisely as Rasputin had prophesied. If I die, the dynasty will perish within 2 years. But the conspirators paid a heavy price immediately. Dmitri developed a nervous condition and couldn't find sleep without laudanum. He claimed Rasputin haunted his nightmares, always rising from icy water with accusations of betrayal. The Grand Duke was exiled to Persia within weeks of the murder, officially for his own protection. Purishkevich survived the longest, but arguably suffered the most. He lost his seat in parliament when the provisional government took power. His estate was seized by peasants who believed he had murdered their holy man. He fled to southern Russia during the Civil War, contracted typhus in a refugee camp, and died delirious in 1920, reportedly calling out Rasputin's name. Yusupov escaped to Paris with a fortune in jewels tucked away in his wife's luggage. Wealth, however, couldn't buy him peace. He suffered chronic insomnia and employed bodyguards until his death in 1967. In his final interview, he claimed the basement was indeed haunted. I hear his voice every anniversary. The very words he spoke that night. Felix, Felix. I'll tell everything. Dr. Lazovert fled to France and assumed a new identity. He never again practiced medicine. In his private journals, unearthed after his death in 1941, he wrote obsessively about the failed poisoning, pages of chemical calculations, desperately trying to comprehend why the cyanide failed. His final entry: some men are simply too evil to die easily. The Moika Palace basement is preserved today as a museum. Visitors can see the exact room where it all began. The Persian carpet is long gone, but the ebony crucifix cabinet still stands against the wall. Tour guides point to dark stains on the wooden floor that even the most rigorous cleaning couldn't erase. Temperature sensors indicate the room consistently remains a few degrees colder than the rest of the palace, even in the height of summer. The bridge where they dumped him is now called Rasputin Bridge by locals, though official maps still bear the name Petrovsky. Every December 30th, someone leaves flowers at the spot where he plunged through the ice, anonymous bouquets that appear overnight. The authorities have never caught whoever is responsible. The death mask vanished during the Revolution, but resurfaced in 1978 at a London auction house. A private collector purchased it for a hefty sum and donated it to the Russian Orthodox Church in exile. They refused to display it publicly, claiming it radiates an unsettling, evil energy that disturbs visitors. But here's what the history books don't often tell you. In 1993, workers renovating the palace basement uncovered a hidden compartment behind the crucifix cabinet. Inside was Rasputin's personal prayer book, apparently dropped during the struggle. The pages were stained with his blood. On the final page, written in his own hand, "Death is not the end." Carbon dating confirmed the ink dated back to December 1916. The prayer book now resides in the Russian State Archives, file number 7792. They do not put it on public display. Recent analysis of the bloodstains using modern forensic techniques revealed something truly astonishing. The handwriting was made after the first gunshot, while he lay bleeding on the basement floor. He had enough consciousness and strength to scrawl those 4 words before rising to attack Yusupov. His final prophecy, scrawled in his own blood as he lay dying. The monk who refused to die took 6 bullets, enough poison to fell an army, and a frozen river to finally cease breathing.